All right, ready to dive in. Today, it's Frankenstein. But not the Boris Karloff movie monster. We're going way deeper with your source, the Wikipedia article.
Excellent choice.
Yeah, it's amazing how much more there is to this story than just, a monster running around.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. Frankenstein is so much more than that.
So, ready to uncover the real story, the characters, a little bit about Mary Shelley herself.
Let's do it.
Okay, so to understand all that, I guess we have to start with the story itself, right? And the article mentions it's a frame narrative, which always makes me think of those, like, Russian nesting dolls.
Exactly. It's like a story within a story. And it all starts with Captain Walton, this explorer obsessed with reaching the North Pole. He's our outermost doll, so to speak.
Right. And out there in the Arctic, his crew rescues this guy, Victor Frankenstein, who's basically at death's door.
Right. Victor's at rock bottom chasing this giant figure across the ice, consumed by guilt.
It's like he's literally staring into the abyss of his own ambition.
And he sees a reflection of his younger self in Walton, which is why he decides to tell his story. Almost like a warning.
Oh, that's interesting. So it's not just a stylistic choice, this frame narrative.
No, it lets Shelley layer these different perspectives onto Victor's story. It was a technique used by a lot of writers back then, especially when they were dealing with controversial or, taboo topics.
So we're already starting to question how reliable Victor is as a narrator.
Exactly. It makes you wonder, is he telling us the whole truth?
Which makes it even more intriguing.
Yeah.
Right? And his story starts off so classic. A wealthy family, close to his adopted sister, Elizabeth. Then, bam, his mom dies just as he's heading off to university.
It's our first taste of this sense of loss that just permeates the entire book. And at university, Victor just dives headfirst into all these mysteries of life, chemistry, anatomy.
Trying to conquer death, basically.
It's like he's trying to fill the void left by his mother with this power of creation.
And this is where most people think, okay, here comes the lightning storm, the lab accident, the monster. But the Wikipedia article makes it clear it's not that simple.
No, it's much more deliberate. Victor spends 2 years meticulously crafting this creature. It's almost artistic the way Shelley describes it.
It's like he's obsessed with pushing the boundaries of science. Almost like a modern-day biohacker in a way.
Absolutely. And what's really interesting? Shelley is so vague about the actual process of bringing the creature to life.
Which makes it even creepier, right?
It's like we're left to imagine the horrors that Victor unleashed.
And when the creature finally opens its eyes, well, Victor isn't exactly thrilled, is he?
Horrified. He calls the creature hideous, runs away, tries to forget the whole thing ever happened.
Classic bad parenting, right?
But of course, you can't just abandon something you've brought into existence.
And this creature's not just going to sit around gathering dust. He escapes and eventually finds Victor. And this is where it gets really interesting for me. He demands a companion. He's articulate, making a case for his right to happiness.
It's amazing, isn't it? Back then, this idea of a monster being capable of thought was radical.
But it's so relevant now.
Yeah.
With all the talk about AI and consciousness.
Right. Does something need to look human to be worthy of our empathy? It makes you think.
Okay, so Victor's caught in this impossible situation. He's terrified of creating another creature, but he's also consumed with guilt for abandoning the first one.
He's the embodiment of this clash between ambition and responsibility, a cautionary tale for sure.
Does he give in? Does he create a companion for the creature?
He reluctantly agrees, but as he's budding this new creation, he's just riddled with doubt. What if she's even more monstrous? What if they reproduce and threaten humanity?
I can see where he's coming from.
It's a full-blown existential crisis. And in a moment of panic, he destroys the unfinished female creature.
Uh-oh. That's not going to go over well.
And it doesn't. The creature is enraged. He vows revenge on Victor and everyone he loves. Talk about raising the stakes.
Yikes. So he's not messing around. What happens next?
Well, he murders Victor's younger brother, William, and frames the nanny, Justine, for the crime.
Oh, man. That's awful.
It's incredibly tragic because it shows how Victor's actions have these ripple effects. Innocent people are paying the price for his ambition.
And Victor can't tell anyone the truth without sounding completely insane.
Exactly. He's trapped by his own secret.
But the creature's not finished, is he?
Not even close. Fueled by rage and grief, he goes on this terrifying revenge spree. He kills Victor's best friend, and then, on Victor's wedding night...
Oh no, don't tell him.
He murders Elizabeth. Just imagine the devastation.
That's like a Greek tragedy.
And Victor is left utterly alone, obsessed with hunting down the creature and bringing him to justice.
So it becomes this chase across Europe and into the Arctic wilderness, which brings us back to Captain Walton and his ship trapped in the ice.
Right. Victor's story ends, but Walton's is just beginning.
And he's heard Victor's tale, this warning about unchecked ambition. But he's also a man of science, driven by that same thirst for knowledge that consumed Victor.
So the big question is, will he heed Victor's warning?
Good question. I guess we'll have to wait to find out more about Mary Shelley's world and what influenced her to write this extraordinary novel.
Ready to explore the mind behind the monster.
Okay, so we've got this Gothic tale, but it comes from a young woman barely out of her teens, 18 years old when she started writing Frankenstein. What was going on in Mary Shelley's life that led to this story?
Well, her life was, this mix of intellectual brilliance and real tragedy. Her mother was Mary Wollstonecraft, the famous writer and feminist.
Oh, wow, I didn't realize that.
Yeah, but she died just days after Mary was born.
So Shelley grows up surrounded by, like, all these radical thinkers, but with this shadow of loss hanging over her. Like Frankenstein was almost destined to be.
Right. And then her relationship with her father, William Godwin, the philosopher, it was complicated. Brilliant guy, but maybe not the best dad.
Kind of like Victor in his creation, right? Wanting connection, but also fearing the consequences.
Yeah, there are definitely parallels there. And then, the tragedies in Mary's own life. She lost her first child as a baby and another one while writing Frankenstein. Talk about understanding the fragility of life.
Wow, that's incredibly sad. No wonder the book is so full of grief and loss.
But Frankenstein wasn't written in isolation. The Wikipedia article mentions this trip Mary took with Percy Shelley and Lord Byron in 1816.
Oh yeah, I've heard about this. The Year Without a Summer. Volcanoes erupting. Crazy weather.
Exactly. And this spooky writing contest that led to Frankenstein.
Okay, stop right there. Bad weather, a castle, a bunch of romantic poets trying to scare each other. You have to tell me more.
Picture it. They're stuck inside this villa, rain's pouring down, and they're reading ghost stories to pass the time. Byron suggests they each write one.
Ooh, spooky.
And that's when Mary has this vivid waking dream. It becomes the seed for Frankenstein.
Chills, literal chills. What was the dream about?
She describes seeing this pale student of unhallowed arts kneeling next to this, this creature he'd made, this hideous phantasm of a man coming to life.
And that image just sparked this whole story.
It terrified her, but it also, ignited something profound.
It's like she tapped into this primal fear, the line between life and death. But it wasn't just a horror story, was it? It's considered early science fiction, too.
Right. The modern Prometheus, that's the subtitle. It links back to that Greek myth, where Prometheus steals fire from the gods.
And gives it to humanity.
Yeah, and he's punished, just like Victor suffers for his ambition.
So Victor is this modern-day Prometheus defying the laws of nature. Was Shelley commenting on the scientific progress of her time?
Definitely. Those anxieties about science going too far, creating things we can't control. And this was 1818, a time of huge changes. Frankenstein was like a bombshell.
I can imagine. What do the critics think?
Oh, all over the place. Some called it poetic, others called it disgusting absurdity, really polarized.
Makes sense.
And get this, it was first published anonymously.
Really? Why?
Partly because it was considered scandalous for a woman to write such a, daring novel.
Wow. So Mary Shelley wasn't even given credit at first.
Not until the second edition a few years later. It's amazing to think about this groundbreaking work and the woman behind it being, silenced.
It's a reminder that there are so many voices that haven't been heard. But back to the creature. The article points out he doesn't have a name. I never really thought about that before.
Such a powerful choice, right?
Yeah.
By not giving him a name, Shelley forces us to confront our own prejudices. He's called a monster, a fiend. But he also shows compassion, he's intelligent, he wants to connect with others.
It's like by labeling him a monster, we're taking away his humanity. That's what Victor does too.
Exactly. And his ability to think and feel, that makes him even more unsettling. Are we really that different from the creature we fear?
Okay, now I'm really curious how this all wraps up. We've got Victor's story, Mary Shelley's life woven in, and what happens to Captain Walton. He's heard the warning, but does he listen? So Walton's got Victor's tragic tale right in front of him, but he's also got that explorer's drive, to push the limits. I mean, come on, he wants to conquer the North Pole.
It's that age-old battle, right? Head versus heart, logic versus...
ambition.
Yeah. So what do you think? Does he keep going?
Knowing how these stories usually go, I'm betting on ambition winning out.
Oh.
What happens?
It's actually his crew that throws a wrench in the works. They're like,
Yeah.
nope, we are not dying in this icy wasteland. Basically, they mutiny.
Wow, mutiny? Talk about pressure. His crew's freaking out, and he's got this dying man's plea ringing in his ears. So what's he do?
Tough spot to be in, right?
Yeah, no kidding. But hang on, what about Victor? Does he ever let go of his, obsession with revenge?
Victor, not a chance.
Yeah.
Even on his deathbed, he's totally fixated on catching the creature. He gives this whole speech to the crew all about duty and courage.
It's like he's trying to, I don't know, live through them, achieve his goals even though he's, well, dying.
Almost like his ambition itself has become this monstrous thing, consuming him from the inside out.
So does he die, still hating the creature?
He does. And then, get this, shortly after Victor dies, Walton finds the creature right there on the ship, mourning over Victor's body.
Hold on, the creature, mourning. I thought he was supposed to be this, heartless monster celebrating Victor's death.
That's the genius of Shelley, right? She flips the script. This creature we've been told is a monster shows real, raw grief.
So it wasn't just an act, all that anger and revenge.
The creature tells Walton straight up, Victor's death hasn't brought him peace, just more despair.
So all that suffering led to nothing.
Wow.
He realizes how pointless it all was, how much everyone lost. And in that realization, we see his humanity.
It's like that saying, hurting people hurt people.
Exactly. So the question is, what happens to him now?
Does he, join Walton's crew, try to make amends somehow? He doesn't. The creature decides to end it all. He says he can't live in a world that only sees him as a monster. He wants to erase himself completely.
That's so tragic. He was a victim from the start. And in the end, he chooses to just disappear.
And the book ends with Walton watching him drift off on this ice raft, fading into the mist. It's this really powerful image full of sadness and loss.
Man, I never expected Frankenstein to hit me so hard emotionally. So much more than just a horror story. It's about life, death, responsibility. It's got everything.
It stays with you because it taps into these deep human anxieties. I mean, look at us now. With AI, genetic engineering, we're pushing boundaries all the time.
Like Mary Shelley saw the future,
Yeah.
right? Are we making the same mistakes as Victor Frankenstein?
That's the big question, isn't it?
Yeah.
What are our responsibilities when we create, whether it's life or technology or even just ideas? Where do we draw the line?
Wow, this has been an amazing deep dive. Seriously, mind blown.
Yeah.
I think I need to go reread Frankenstein right now.
There's always something new to discover.
Absolutely. Thanks for joining me on this wild ride. And to all you listeners out there, thanks for taking the plunge with us. Keep exploring, keep asking questions, and keep diving deep.
All right, so you want to know about Hunab, huh? Well, good. Let's deep dive into this. A quick Wikipedia search. Yeah, it tells you it's like the one god
Yeah.
from these Yucatec Maya texts, and mainly during the colonial period, simple. Right. Well, hold on tight, because there's so much more to this story
Oh, yeah.
than you think.
It's wild how Hunab has transformed
Yeah.
over time, almost like a chameleon adapting
Well,
to
sure.
different environments.
Yeah.
It's this whole thing, this tale weaving together ancient languages, the influence of the Spanish missionaries,
Oh, yeah.
and even it gets into modern New Age philosophies.
Yeah.
By the end of this, you'll see just how complex Hunab really is.
Yeah. I mean, Wikipedia mentions Christianity.
Yeah.
But it doesn't really get into it. We're talking a
Right.
collision of cultures, symbols being reinterpreted,
Yeah.
and maybe even some instances of, let's just say, creatively reimagined things. So we're going to separate those historical facts from the, more imaginative interpretations.
Yeah, we have to go to the primary sources.
Yes.
To really get a clear picture.
Exactly.
The question is, what did Hunab really mean to the Maya? If it even existed
Right.
before the Spanish arrived.
Okay, so let's unpack that. The Diccionario de Motul, the 16th century dictionary, that's our first puzzle piece.
Yes.
And it describes Hunab as the only living and true God.
Right.
Sounds pretty straightforward.
Yeah.
Monotheism, right?
You would think so, but there's a twist.
There's a twist.
Yeah, the dictionary also says that Hunab didn't have a physical form. and
Oh.
couldn't be represented in images.
Right, yeah.
And that raises big questions about Hunab-ku before the colonial period,
Yeah.
especially when you compare it to all the imagery
Yeah,
that we see with other Mayan deities.
that's true. It sounds more abstract, like
Right.
a concept than
Yeah.
a god that you'd build temples for.
Yeah, exactly.
Or have specific rituals around.
Right.
So where does Christianity come in? That's where the Chilambalam of Chumayel comes in.
Exactly.
Right.
The Chilambalam of Chumayel, it's a book written after the Spanish conquest.
Okay.
And it mentions Hunab-ku too. Now, scholar William Hanks,
Okay.
he suggests that maybe the Spanish missionaries, they might have used this term like strategically.
Okay.
They were trying to convert the Maya, who
Yeah.
had this polytheistic system,
All right.
to Christianity.
Right.
And introducing this idea of like a single all-powerful God
Yeah.
would have been like a key part of that.
Yeah. So Hunab-ku might have been like a way to bridge those two different
Exactly.
belief systems, like
Yeah.
make Christianity make more sense to the Maya
Totally.
and connect it to something
Yeah.
that seemed kind of familiar.
That's the essence of syncretism,
Yeah.
the blending of like religious beliefs and practices. It was like a super common tactic
Right.
used by missionaries across the Americas.
Oh.
It wasn't just about like imposing a new religion.
Right.
It was about merging it
Right.
with existing beliefs
Yeah.
to make that transition
Yeah.
like smoother, easier.
Yeah.
Here's where things get even
All right.
more interesting.
Okay. Now I'm hooked. Tell me more
Okay.
about how this syncretism actually worked.
It's unlikely the Spanish just invented Hunab-ku,
Right.
out of nowhere. They probably tried to link it
Yeah.
with Itzamna, the Mayan creator god.
Right.
It's almost like they were saying, look, your god Itzamna
Right.
is basically the same as our god,
Right.
just with a different name.
Kind of sneaky,
Right.
when you think about it. And this
Yeah.
whole idea of Hunab-ku as this pre-Hispanic supreme god,
Right.
that's not really accepted anymore.
No, not really. Most Mayanist scholars, they don't
Yeah.
hold that view anymore.
Yeah.
While, books like Sylvanus Morley's The Ancient Maya,
Yeah.
they kind of popularized that idea. Further research has kind of cast doubt on it.
Yeah.
The evidence suggests that Hunab-ku as this like singular all-powerful deity,
Yeah.
it's more like a colonial era concept,
Okay.
not an ancient Mayan one.
So we have this term
Yeah.
that maybe came from this culture clash
Yeah.
and religious conversion efforts.
Right.
But how did it jump from the 16th century
Right.
to like 20th century New Age spirituality? That's
not the big jump.
the huge jump.
It is, and it takes us to the mid-20th century
Yeah.
with a man named Domingo Martinez Paredes.
Martinez Paredes.
Yeah.
I've heard that name before.
He's the one who brought Hunab-ku into the New Age movement.
Didn't he have some interesting interpretations
Yeah,
of Mayan concepts?
He firmly believed that Hunab-ku represented like Mayan monotheism,
Okay.
even though, scholars were already starting to question that.
Right.
He even came up with a symbol for Hunab-ku, a square inside a circle,
Wait.
or vice versa.
A square and a circle.
Yeah.
Isn't that the symbol you see everywhere
Yeah.
for Hunab-ku? The one that looks like a target?
That's the one, but here's the thing.
Or a galaxy. Yeah.
It's not from
Oh.
any ancient Mayan source.
Really?
That's a key point
That's a key
that
point.
a lot of people miss. Martinez Paredes's square and circle symbol,
Yeah.
it didn't really catch on.
Okay.
The one we see today has a whole different backstory.
Okay, so if that's not the original symbol,
Yeah.
where did this popular Hunab-ku design come from?
So it's this fascinating story
Yeah.
of how symbols can be borrowed and like reinterpreted.
Yeah.
It starts with two guys who were like super influential
Okay.
in New Age circles, Hunbatsman and Jose Arguelles.
Okay.
Hunbatsman. He first mentioned Hunab-ku in his book,
Okay.
Religion, Ciencia Maya, in 1986.
Okay.
And that's how he introduced it to a wider audience.
And then Arguelles kind of took it and ran with it.
Exactly. Arguelles, he put Hunab-ku right at the center of his book, The Mayan Factor.
He was all about Mayan prophecies and galactic alignment and all that.
Exactly. But here's the thing.
Yeah.
He proposed a totally different symbol
Okay.
for Hunab-ku.
What?
And it wasn't even Mayan.
So the symbol everyone thinks of with Hunab-ku
Like,
isn't even Mayan.
it's a bit mind-boggling.
I'm so confused.
He took it from an Aztec ritual cloak
Oh, wow.
depicted in the Codex Megliabeciano.
So an Aztec symbol
Oh,
is
no.
used to represent
Yeah.
this supposedly ancient Mayan concept. That's ironic.
It is. It shows you how ideas and symbols can be
Yeah.
taken out of their original context
Right.
and like repurposed
Yeah.
to fit certain
We
narratives.
got to get to the bottom of this.
Yeah.
What was that original Aztec design about?
Okay, so the design on the Aztec cloak, it probably represented the Milky Way.
Okay.
Yeah. And it's actually featured in Zelia Naval's book on ancient Mexican civilization, published in 1901.
So nothing to do with Hunab
No.
or Mayan monotheism?
Not at all. It wasn't until like the 1970s
Okay.
that this design started to spread beyond like academic circles.
Hmm.
This epigrapher
Okay.
named Gordon Whitaker,
Okay.
he commissioned a rug based on the design
Oh, wow.
from weavers in Oaxaca, Mexico.
So it was literally woven into a new context.
Exactly. And that's probably where Arguelles saw it
Okay.
before, modifying it and then presenting it as the symbol of Hunab in his book.
This is getting more interesting. From colonial dictionaries to Aztec cloaks to Oaxacan rugs.
Yeah.
What a journey.
I know, right? And the story doesn't end there. John Major Jenkins, another guy connected to Mayanism,
Yeah.
he also used the symbol in his publications.
Yeah.
It's wild how the meaning and the context of the
Yes.
symbol can be like constantly reinterpreted
All right.
and repurposed over time.
Yeah. Yeah.
It really makes you think about like critical thinking,
Yeah.
especially when we see information about ancient cultures.
Yeah.
We need to question like where these ideas come from,
Right.
who's like promoting them, the
Yeah.
evidence, supporting them.
Yeah, it's like a game of telephone, right? You start with the one god in a colonial dictionary,
Right.
and it ends up a galaxy symbol on, like
Yeah.
a New Age poster.
Yeah. Yeah.
Quite a transformation.
It raises those questions of like cultural appropriation.
Yeah.
We have a symbol taken from Aztec culture
Right.
and then used to represent this
Yeah.
concept that we're attributing to the Maya, even though
Yeah.
there's no historical connection.
It seems like that happens a lot, especially with indigenous cultures.
Yeah.
People are drawn to the mystery and the spirituality,
Yeah.
but they don't always do the research
Right.
to understand the actual history and
Yeah.
context.
Absolutely. It's crucial to approach these topics with respect and accuracy.
Yeah.
It's not about like dismissing spirituality or new age ideas
of course.
entirely,
Right.
but more about
Yeah.
grounding them in a
Yeah.
solid understanding of the cultures
Right.
that they claim to represent.
So given all of this,
Yep.
what can we actually say about Hunab?
Okay, so we can definitely say that Hunab has like a complex
Yeah.
and layered history.
Right.
It's a term shaped by colonialism, syncretism, and,
Right.
New Age interpretations.
Right.
While that concept of like a single Maya god
Yeah.
might seem appealing,
Yeah.
the evidence really points to Hunab, at least as we understand it today,
Right.
not being this pre-Hispanic deity.
It's almost like a reflection of how
Yeah.
people have tried to understand Mayan culture,
You could say
over time.
Yeah.
First, you have the Spanish missionaries trying to fit it into
Ah.
their Christian framework.
Totally.
And then, New Age thinkers are looking for that monotheistic element that aligns with their beliefs.
And throughout that process,
Yeah.
the original meaning
Right.
and context become blurred.
Yeah.
It's a cautionary tale
Yeah.
about how easily information can be manipulated,
Yeah.
reinterpreted
Yeah.
to fit different agendas.
You mentioned earlier
Yeah.
that William Hanks thinks that missionaries used Nabku as a way to introduce
Yes.
their concept of God.
Yes.
Could you talk more about why that's significant?
Sure. Hanks's argument, it highlights the power dynamics at play
Right.
during colonization, right?
Yeah.
Missionaries, they held a position of authority,
Right.
and their efforts to convert indigenous populations,
Yeah.
it often involved reinterpreting or even
Mhm.
suppressing
Yeah.
existing beliefs, right?
Right.
So using Hunab
Yeah.
could have been a way to,
Right.
make Christianity more palatable, easier to digest.
Yeah.
But it also risked distorting the Maya's understanding
Yeah.
of their own spiritual traditions.
Yeah. You also mentioned that Martinez Paredes linked Hunab
Yeah.
to the phrase in Lakek,
Yeah.
often translated as "you are my other eye."
Right.
Right. That's another phrase you hear
Oh, yeah, all the time.
a lot in New Age circles.
Yeah. In Lakek is interesting.
What's the story behind that?
It's often presented as like
Yeah.
this ancient Mayan greeting,
Yeah.
but there's not much evidence to support that.
Oh, really?
Like Hunab Ku, it seems to be, like
Yeah.
a more recent idea.
Okay.
While the phrase might be meaningful
Right.
for those who use it,
Yeah.
it's important to be aware
Yeah.
of its origins and not like
Yeah.
attribute it to a culture
Right.
that might not have used it that way.
It's like those inspirational quotes you see
Exactly.
attributed to like Gandhi or Buddha
Yeah.
that are completely made up.
Right.
The sentiment might be nice,
Yeah.
but the attribution is
Misleading.
misleading. Yeah.
It's about like being aware
yeah.
of where our information comes from
Right.
and being willing to like
Yeah.
question what we're told.
Yeah.
Even if it like sounds nice
Right.
or
right.
it confirms our belief.
So if we strip away the New Age interpretations
Yeah.
and the borrowed symbolism,
Right.
what's left of Hunab Ku?
What we're left with is a term
Yeah.
that appears in those colonial era texts,
Right.
likely as a way to
Yeah.
introduce the idea of a single god
Right.
to the Maya. It's a product of cultural exchange
Yeah.
and religious conversion,
Yeah.
not a pre-Hispanic deity.
It's almost anticlimactic.
I know, right?
We start with this grand idea of a supreme Maya god
Yeah.
and end up with a term created by missionaries.
But it's still fascinating.
Yeah.
It reminds us that history
Yeah.
is rarely straightforward.
Yeah.
It's full of twists and turns,
Yeah.
cultural collisions,
Yeah.
reinterpretations of narratives.
Yeah.
Sometimes the truth is more interesting than the myth.
Yeah. I agree. This deep dive has given us
Right.
a lot to think about.
A lot to ponder.
Not just about Hunab Ku, but about how we approach
Yeah,
information about ancient cultures.
absolutely. It's a call to be critical thinkers,
Yeah.
question our assumptions,
Yeah.
seek accurate and respectful
Yeah.
representations of the past.
Yeah.
And maybe most importantly,
Yeah.
be open to the idea that the journey of discovery
Yeah.
is just as valuable
Yeah.
as the destination.
That's a great point. This whole thing has really made me think about the power of symbols.
Right.
You know, like it's amazing how a design can be
Yeah.
taken from one context and given a totally new meaning,
Yeah.
even if it's like historically inaccurate.
Yeah. It kind of speaks to that innate desire
Yeah.
to find meaning and connection.
Right.
Like symbols, they have a way of tapping into
Yeah.
our emotions and beliefs, even subconsciously, you know?
Yeah, like how the swastika was
Yeah.
originally a symbol of peace and good luck in different cultures.
Right.
And then, you know, the Nazis completely twisted it.
Exactly.
And now it's just
Yeah.
hard to see it
Right.
without associating it with
Yeah.
hate and oppression.
Exactly. The same symbol
Yeah.
can evoke completely different reactions
Yeah.
depending on
Right.
the context, like who's using it.
Right.
So it reminds us that
Yeah.
we shouldn't just accept symbols at face value.
Right.
We need to understand their history,
Yeah.
how they're being used.
So when we see that Hunab Ku symbol
Yeah.
on like jewelry, tattoos, websites, like
Yeah.
what do we make of it?
It's a chance to think critically.
Right.
Start a conversation. Ask ourselves, what
Yeah.
does this symbol mean to me?
Right.
What does it mean to the culture it supposedly comes from?
Right.
Am I using it in a way that's respectful and like
Yeah.
informed?
It's not about like
Yeah.
policing symbols
Right.
or judging people.
It's about encouraging that deeper awareness.
Yeah. Exactly. Knowledge is power.
Right.
When we understand the true origins of a symbol,
Yeah.
we can make like more informed choices about
Yeah.
how we engage with it.
Thinking back to the Diccionario de Motul,
Yeah.
describing Hunab Ku as formless,
Right.
unrepresentable, it's
No,
like
no.
the opposite
Yeah.
of it being
Yeah.
associated with a symbol.
It is. It shows how the meaning of Hunab Ku has been like shaped and reshaped
Right.
to fit different narratives.
Yeah.
And it reminds us that even when something's presented as ancient wisdom,
Yeah.
it's good to examine its history
Yeah.
critically.
So for our listeners who've been on this journey with us,
Yeah.
what's the main takeaway?
Stay curious,
Okay.
but also be skeptical.
Yeah.
Don't just accept everything you hear
Right.
about ancient cultures, spiritual concepts. Dig deeper, explore, and
Yeah.
ask those critical questions.
You might be surprised by what you find.
It reminds me of what we talked about earlier about the journey
Yeah.
itself, you know?
Yeah.
Even if we don't find what we expected,
Yeah.
the process of learning and questioning is
It is.
super rewarding.
Absolutely. understanding the true origins of Hunab, even if it's,
Yeah,
less mystical,
right.
it lets us appreciate the complexity
Yeah,
of Mayan culture
right.
and that lasting impact of colonialism.
Yeah,
It helps us to, look at information carefully,
yeah,
especially when it comes to history and spirituality.
yeah. That's a great point to end on.
Yeah.
So keep those minds curious and those questions coming. Until next time, happy exploring.
Ready for some time travel today? We're diving deep into the ancient world, talking about the Temple of Artemis. And yeah, most people, they know it as one of those 7 wonders, right? But come on, it's got to be more than just a name on a list.
Oh, absolutely. Way more. See, the Temple of Artemis, it's not just one building. It's like this whole saga. Destruction, rebuilding, centuries of it. Each version they came up with, even more impressive than the last.
Right, over in Ephesus, modern-day Turkey now. This temple, dedicated to Artemis, the Greek goddess of the hunt. I mean, can you imagine just walking by that thing back then? It wasn't pretty awe-inspiring. But here's what I'm really curious about. The site itself, it's old, way older than the temple everyone pictures, right?
Oh, yeah, and that's where it gets good. We're talking like way before the Greeks even showed up. People in Ephesus, they were worshiping this great goddess. Think Bronze Age, maybe even older. Pausanias, that old writer, he even claimed it might go back to, get this, before the Amazons.
Older than the Amazons. Whoa. Okay, now that's adding some serious history to it. So we've got this temple reborn over and over, ties to some powerful women maybe, and this mysterious great goddess. Anything else we should know before we really get into it?
Well, you can't talk about the Temple of Artemis without mentioning the destruction, and not just once either. Floods, fires, even had a pretty infamous arsonist. Dude's a legend for all the wrong reasons, but still a legend.
Okay, yeah, you've definitely got my attention with that one. Let's rewind a bit, though. Way back. What can you tell us about those early days, before they had all that fancy marble everyone thinks of?
Imagine, like, 800 BC. World's a different place, obviously, but there in Ephesus, boom, temple. Probably not as fancy as what came later, but still, the main place for worship back then. Archaeologists even found pieces of pottery, shards from around that time. Give us a little peek into what they were up to.
So, like little pieces of a puzzle, those pottery bits. This early temple, I'm guessing they used whatever they had lying around to build it, not like all that marble they used later, huh?
Yeah, exactly. Problem was, nature, well, it had other ideas. 7th century BC, this huge flood just rips through Ephesus, buries the whole temple in mud, and who knows what else. Shows you, even back then, Mother Nature, she always gets the last laugh.
Wow. Makes you think what else that flood washed away, but also what it saved for us to find later, right? They found some pretty amazing things in all that muck, didn't they?
You're talking about that ivory griffin plaque and those amber drops, right? Beautifully preserved. Think those probably decorated a wooden statue, the Lady of Ephesus. Makes you realize there's probably a lot more to the story than we even know.
So flood wipes everything out, but it's like a clean slate too. And then, this is where things get interesting. King Croesus of Lydia, right? Dude was loaded, but he also loved the arts.
For sure. Croesus, he saw a chance to do something big, and he pretty much bankrolled the Second Temple around 550 BC. This was different.
This is where we get the marble, right? First Greek temple made out of that stuff. Must have been quite the statement.
Oh, yeah. It was the Taj Mahal of its day. Over 115 meters long, 46 meters wide, those massive marble columns. The architects, Chersiphron and his son Metagenes, they were ahead of their time.
Speaking of those columns, Pliny the Elder, he wrote about that, right? So they used some unusual stuff in the foundation to make it earthquake-proof.
Totally. Layers of wool, charcoal, all pounded down. Seems crazy now, but it worked. They knew their environment and how to make buildings last. Who knows what other tricks they had up their sleeves that we just haven't discovered yet.
It's amazing how advanced they were back then. But even their best builders, sometimes, stuff happens. And that brings us to, well, the fire. 356 BC. Can't really talk about the temple without mentioning that, can we?
Yeah, that's the thing about history, right? Sometimes it's not earthquakes or floods, it's people. And this fire, it's one for the books. Herostratus.
Herostratus.
Yeah.
Talk about an infamous name, right? I mean, how do you even destroy something that big, that permanent on purpose?
They say he set fire to the roof beams, the wooden ones. Can you imagine it? That huge temple going up in flames, all that marble glowing in the firelight. And he admitted it, too. Said he did it so people would remember his name. And you know what? It worked. We're still talking about him.
Can't argue with that, I guess.
Yeah.
But I read somewhere that some people don't think he could have even gotten to the roof. I mean, wouldn't a place like that have guards, to keep people from, well, burning it down?
Exactly. So that's got some folks thinking maybe there's more to the story. What if he was the priests?
Wait, you mean they set fire to their own temple? Why would they do that?
Well, remember we were talking about the foundation. What if maybe it wasn't as solid as they thought? The temple could have been, sinking a little. But they couldn't just move a holy place like that. So maybe fire gave them a reason, a way to rebuild without breaking any sacred rules.
Wow. It's like a conspiracy theory, but from, like, ancient times.
Yeah, uh-huh.
Crazy. But you can't talk about the fire without mentioning Alexander the Great, right? I mean, talk about timing.
Right. Born the same night as the fire. Plutarch, that old writer, he thought Artemis, the goddess, she was so busy making sure Alexander was born, she forgot about her temple. Like, oops, my bad.
Yeah.
Whether it was fate or some guy who wanted to be famous or even the priests,
Yeah.
that second temple was gone. But, you know the saying, what doesn't kill you
Makes you stronger. And they definitely came back strong. This third temple, they really went all out this time, didn't they?
This wasn't just rebuilding, this was showing off. This temple, it was massive, like dwarfing the other two, big time. 137 meters long, imagine that. 69 meters wide and tall, 18 meters high.
Okay, that is seriously huge. No wonder it took them, what, like 100 years to build the thing? But size isn't everything. What else did they do this time?
I would picture this. More than 127 columns, all marble, all carved. And inside, in the main part, this amazing new statue of Artemis, made by Endois.
Endois. Wait, wasn't he a student of, like, Daedalus? Talk about bringing in the A-team. But it wasn't just him, right? I thought other big-name artists worked on this temple, too.
Oh, yeah. They got the best of the best. Polykleitos, famous for his statues, and Scopas, he did those really expressive sculptures, all working together. In fact, Pliny even said, Scopas, he carved these scenes all about the Amazons right there on the temple, bringing it all back around.
Man, what a combination. All that incredible art in this building that's basically a monument to go big or go home. But we got to remember, it wasn't just about the looks. This was a busy place, heart of Ephesus.
Right.
More than just praying. People came there to celebrate, to, I don't know, maybe even find a husband or wife.
Easy to forget when you're thinking about, like, columns and statues, right?
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, the Temple of Artemis, it was part of everyday life there. And speaking of everyday life, we got to talk about the Artemisia. That was their big festival for Artemis. Imagine, like, a month-long party, people coming from all over to celebrate.
Okay, a month. That's serious dedication to having a good time. What did they even do for a whole month?
Oh, you name it. They had athletic games, the whole religious thing, music, dancing. It was the place to be back then. Probably a million stories, right? People meeting for the first time, falling in love.
Sounds like a mix of the Olympics, a Renaissance fair, and maybe a little bit of, I don't know, ancient tinder thrown in. But it shows you how important Artemis was to them. This wasn't just like praying to some faraway goddess. This was personal.
Totally. She was their goddess, the one who protected them, the one who brought good fortune. And that local thing, it even shows up in how they pictured her. Totally different from what the Greeks were doing.
Right. You're talking about that statue, the one with all the breasts.
Yeah.
Pliny described it, right? I always thought that was kind of weird. But now they're saying maybe it's not even breasts.
Yeah, they used to think those shapes, they meant fertility, the whole goddess thing. But lately, some scholars are saying maybe they were just decorations. Like those amber drops we were talking about, maybe that's what they were. On the older statue, the wooden one.
So more about looking good than being a certain way. It makes you think, how much of what we think we know is just, I don't know, guessing. But anyway, even the best times have to end, right?
Yeah.
What happened to the Temple of Artemis? Why isn't it still there?
Well, things change. Like, those Goths, they were a rough crowd. They came through in, like, 268 A.D., did a number on the temple. And then there's Christianity, right? Once Rome went for that, the old gods, they weren't so popular anymore. So by 500 A.D., or around then, looks like they shut the temple down for good.
From the biggest, fanciest thing around to abandoned. Makes you think, what will people find when they dig us up 1,000 years from now?
Right. Though the story doesn't totally end there. 1869, this archaeologist, John Turtlewood, he finds the site again, buried under, like, centuries of dirt. But he digs it up, and boom, all those amazing things we've been talking about. Statues, pieces of the building, like a little time capsule.
And now some of that stuff is in the British Museum,
Mm-hmm.
right? So even though the real temple is gone, we can still go see some of it. Pretty cool.
That's the best part about archaeology. Putting together these puzzles from little tiny pieces makes you wonder, what are we leaving behind for people to find later on?
I don't know, but it's something to think about. Well, there you have it. The Temple of Artemis. Proof that we've been building amazing things for a long, long time. And sometimes even destroying them.
Thanks for coming along on this deep dive, everybody. We'll see you next time.